work for.
I got to figure out how to get that off of my background one of these days. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I think some companies are they just put it up automatically as your background. Maybe you can't.
I think I can, because I think I might have done it, but
you just forgot.
I just don't see the way to take it off of there.
Okay.
I've tried I'll figure it out. I'll just do a YouTube video or something.
It makes you look really important.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the February 7th, 2022 workshop meeting to order. In attendance are supervisors Don Dowling, Nancy Morris, Jim Johnson, and Vice Chairman Donna D., as well as the Franklin Township Interim Manager Jeff Eastburn, our Township Secretary Sarah Patton, and we have four members of the public. First, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So I'd like to open up to public comment. Before we begin, this public comment can include anything related to the agenda items. We want to give everyone who wishes the opportunity to speak. However, we are meeting virtually. Even so, you still must state your name and whether you are a resident of the township or non-resident taxpayer in the township. If you do not identify yourself, your comments will not be included in the official minutes. Do we have any public comment before we begin? All right, thank you. So I just want to say something real briefly about what our workshop meetings are for. This is the first one that we've had. We as a board don't get to talk together very often. We can talk individually about issues, but it's very rare that we can actually get all five of us in a room and just talk about things. And so what we're trying to do is have this workshop meeting where we can identify a few items that we can work through, talk openly about and publicly about, and then bring those, and if there's any major resolutions or motions that need to be done, we can bring those to the main Board of Supervisors meeting, having done some of the pre-work here already. I think the other thing that'll help us do is offload some of the work that we do in a board meeting, the monthly board meeting, to these meetings to hopefully have shorter meetings overall. And so if the public can't attend one or both, we'll have the discussions up on YouTube. And of course, the minutes will always be available. So with that, we have a couple of options. Donna, I think you'd mentioned we might want to just go right to the West Grove Fire Company and give Melissa a little bit of time to get on board. So why don't we do that? So Nancy, do you want to talk about the West Grove?
I don't have the West Grove unless do you have some sort of, I didn't see any agenda that says each person does what, but what I was going to talk about was the Chester County Hospital and the current hospital situation. Do
I have a different agenda?
Oh, is it not on there? I sent it to, I think Sarah.
Okay. So, all right, that's fine. West Grove Fire Company. So recently there's been a closure in Jennersville. And I think Brandywine is closing or has been closed. Brandywine has closed. And so Neil's here, Neil Vaughn from West Grove Fire Company is going to hear and talk about the proposed increase in service fees for 2022.
Neil, before you start, can I just make a comment? Because I think I reacted wrongly to what you had sent us in terms of the increase. So I remember that you came to us in November, and in that time you were very transparent and talked about that there would be an increase in both the fire company and for the emergency services. And I think it came to about a total of, let me see if I get this right, $201,000 across both of them, give or take a little bit. And then when I saw the email regarding, we need you to agree to this, I thought it was another $26,000 increase on top of what you already told us about in November. And I believe based on the calculations, that's not the case, that overall it's maybe an additional $6,000 or $4,000, $5,000 increase over what you told us in November. The total of $26,000, but you did already alert us back in November about the first $20,000. So I just want to apologize. I misunderstood. I thought it was another $26,000 increase, and that's not the case. So,
Sure. Yeah, and actually, I was prepared to give a quick background. Especially for those new on the board. So how we do our budget is we provide our numbers in late summer, early fall. So we had our meeting with our municipalities. I believe it was the end of August, and that's where we provided our initial budget figure to the municipalities. Since then, obviously, we received word that Jennersville was going to close, and as well as Brandywine Hospital. Then we received word that they were going to open, and then obviously we're here where we are today with the closure of both of those hospitals. So in November, we did provide our municipalities with an updated budget, and what our kind of plan was to go through to go through and deal with this closure. How we worked out the paperwork, and that's probably where we weren't as better descriptive, is each year we provide a service contract to our municipalities, and that's what we sent out at the end of December or mid-December that had our initial budget figures included in it. Some of the feedback that we received as we worked with the municipalities about the Jennersville closure was, what happens if it reopens? So we did a separate service agreement with those updated numbers, and there's a caveat in there that essentially says, if a suitable replacement opens, and if we get to that point, there's a few things that are kind of concerned in the back of our mind. Obviously, we already went through this once. We saw somebody come in, they said they were going to buy. Now again, here we are, no hospital in the area. So we didn't want to trigger it just as that. We kind of wanted to trigger it as anybody who comes in and buys. We're hearing rumors of, they need to sink some money into the facility. They need some time to turn around. So it could be 6 months once a buyer comes in before the facility is open. So that's how we worked our service agreements this year. So that was, kind of our fault. I don't think we explained that, but Donna, to your point, yeah, the amount that we asked for in the end was the amount we did ask for in November. So that's kind of how we got here. And one thing we were asked to do as well was to provide an update to, we are through our first month with Jennersville being closed. So we do have a full impact report that we are able to provide. We could give you the highlights, whatever the board wants to certainly see, we can send it over. I know John and David, it's very similar to what we presented with some updates. Like I said, we just got through January and it was our busiest month ever, EMS call volume wise. So it's here, it's impacting us. And so like I said, it's up to the board. We have a PowerPoint that we can either share with you right now, or we could give you the director's cut, per se, and give you the highlights. So however you would like us to proceed.
So I think it'd be worthwhile to at least give Don and Jim, who probably haven't seen this kind of stuff before, a kind of a run through of your budget and how you get to where you are. You don't have to go through the whole presentation. There's a lot of detail there, but maybe just some of the highlights and
Sure. And so what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to turn it over to Gary Vinicone. He was the one who did our impact presentation. So he does have the highlights. He's our statistician. He has all that. So if do you want them to share?
Yeah, someone's gonna let me share so I can share the presentation.
Are you able to share a screen with Justin's computer by chance?
I
Jeff?
sure can.
Okay.
And Neil, while you're giving the summary, or while Gary
Sure.
is, could you explain why like January was the busiest? I didn't know if it's because you had to go further now, or because there were just more incidents. I mean, it's a simple explanation, but I would like to hear that too.
Sure. We'll make sure that's included, because we do have a slide dedicated to kind of how busy we were, and we do have some of the background behind that.
I did make you up. There you go.
Perfect. So I'm gonna mute up, and like I said, we're gonna turn it over to Gary real quick.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. My name is Gary Vinicum. I'm the EMS manager for Westboro Fire Company. I've been here for about 10 years. So luckily all this stuff it's still showing your screen now. So luckily we have a lot of historical data that we were able to talk about and kind of project. So we put an impact report together, we developed a working document, and then consequently developed an action document. The challenges that we were able to identify were our transport times. We know that from the time we arrive on scene to the emergency department was going to be significantly longer. Our turnaround time, that's a big one that we talk about when we talk about Jennersville Hospital. We were able to typically go available from Jennersville and respond to another emergency. And there's some impactful factors there when we talk about if we need to decon the truck, if we need to restock the truck. They're all things that add time to that turnaround. From a mutual aid perspective, we assist mutual aid agencies, Longwood Fire Company, Union Fire Company of Oxford, and Avondale Fire Company when they're not available for calls, and subsequently they provide service to us when we're not available for calls. And when we talk about level of service, BLS refers to the ambulance transport piece. ALS refers to when the patient needs a higher level of care, and Medic 94 typically upgrades that response. So in 2021, we took 1,015 patients to Jennersville. Normal ED volume there is about 1,400 patients a year, plus or minus, including their walk-ins. And we thought that was an important bullet to look at because we're going to have patients, and we've certainly seen it already, that have called 911 and explicitly told us, we don't know how to get to another hospital. So that was something that we felt was an important data piece to look at. So from the center of our district, Jennersville is about 7.7 minutes away. And you can see all the other ones are 30 to 40 minutes that we looked at. And at the time we put this presentation together, Brandywine closing was not on the table. So you see that included there. But again, all 30 to 40 minutes versus 7.7. So our average turnaround times, and again, that's the time that we arrive at the hospital, clean our truck up, and then we're able to go available. You can see 12.6 minutes jumping up there to 51, 45, 70. Huge impact on our ability to respond to a second or third emergency in our district. And a second or third emergency refers to when one of our ambulances is on a call. If another call comes in, that's referred to as a second emergency. If we have two ambulances on calls in our district and another call comes in, that's referred to as a third emergency. So you'll see some data points coming up on that for what that looked like. So our total call time average in 2021 was 46 minutes from the time we got dispatched till the time we were back in service for the next call. Here were our projections for Christiana, Chester County, Brandywine, and LGH. And you see very significant increases there, going from 46 to 113, 116. Really big jump there and really big impact on our ability to respond.
Hey, Justin, is that just from Jennersville, or is that just the issues that the hospitals themselves are facing?
So this is Gary. The 46 minutes.
Oh, sorry, Gary.
No worries. It's typically Jennersville was 46 minutes. Some of the things that are impacting our total call times and our turnaround times We have had situations 2 hours and 25 minutes is the record, but where we've waited in the emergency department, typically we're seeing anywhere from 1 to 2 hours with a patient on the stretcher waiting to transfer care in the emergency department. And that's becoming, unfortunately, more and more normal, where we arrive and if it only takes us 30 minutes to get our patient off the stretcher, we're like, wow, it's a good day. So certainly 1 to 2 hours is becoming more and more common. We'll pull in and there's 4 stretchers ahead of us all lined up in the hallways with pretty sick patients on them.
So pre-COVID, what was the turnaround time for these hospitals?
These times are from 2021. COVID never really had an impact on our offload times and our turnaround times.
Oh, okay.
The true volume has come where there's 5 hospitals in the county, and now 2 of those hospitals closing. Those patients have to go somewhere else, whether that's by ambulance or even just driving there in their car. Skilled nursing facilities sending patients by private ambulance. So just that volume of patients. And when we talk about the average of 1,400 patients a month, just they need somewhere else to go. And that was just with Jennersville. Brandywine certainly compounds that problem.
Oh, that's interesting. So I guess I would have assumed that some of that delay were missing, beds due to more sick people in the hospital. And what you're saying is now it's more like we just have less hospitals.
Yeah, it's the typical, like there was 5 buckets to put water in, and now there's 3 buckets and there's the same amount of water.
Yeah. Interesting.
So some of the other things we are concerned with is the safety of the EMS crews, patients having behavioral health emergencies, intoxicated patients, and certainly the availability of law enforcement assistance. Typically anywhere in our district, when we go to the scene, to the hospital, if we have a problem there, it's pretty easy to interface with PSP. But when we get into driving to Delaware, when we get into driving to Westchester, we drive through several different jurisdictions. We can be in a different state. So if we have to call for help, we certainly get worried about the safety piece. We saw 184 of those patients in 2020 and 118 of those patients in 2021, year to date, when this was developed in December. Inclement weather certainly has an effect on our EMS crews. We had some inclement weather last week, certainly caused some delays trying to get down the bypass, trying to get through some of the back roads, trying to get into people's houses, and then from there, not having a local hospital. So the dangerous road conditions, the increased turnaround time, just dealing with the weather, the flooding, and then we talk about that recent tornado that went through Oxford last year and the effect that had on our department. That was a situation where nobody in this area can physically get to another hospital. 52 was flooded, several trees were down. So that's certainly a concern we have in the future with no local emergency department. So when we talk about our increased transport distances, we kind of use New London as the center of our district. The average call from dispatch to the hospital is about 8.2 miles. So that drives our fuel usage up. It drives our wear and tear up. We ordered an ambulance 6 months ago that we were due to replace. We just got word that they're going to start building our chassis. So that's not going to be ready until at least 2023, once the chassis gets built. So we had to go out and buy a used ambulance. We were able to procure that from Kennett Fire Company, who closed their EMS service down, kind of as a stopgap to get us to the new ambulance being able to go in service in 2023. So when we see Jennersville at 8.2 miles, and then again, we just see it go up from there, round trip, 34 miles to Christiana, 50 miles to Chester County Hospital, and 64 miles to Lancaster General. So some of the unidentifiable challenges, or things that we're not really able to quantify, is what are our mutual aid companies doing? Union Fire Company, they have upstaffed. Avondale Fire Company has inconsistently upstaffed. Some days they have a second unit on, some days they don't. And Longwood Fire Company is not upstaffed. They're still operating 2 ambulances. Year to date in 2021, we provided mutual aid to mainly those 3, but certainly other agencies in need of mutual aid. So as the demand for service increases, we modeled January of 2021, and you'll see when we talk about call sequencing, our primary call is 179, second call is 54. So again, that's 54 times that our ambulance was on a call. There was an additional call that came into our district. And then the third call is same deal. There was 2 ambulances on calls, and now a third emergency comes in. So when you look at the actual and the projected, it varies a little bit. The big number that we see drop is we see the primary calls goes down to 154, but the third calls goes up to 20. That's an increase of 233%. And you'll see when we look at what actually happened in January of 2022, we were pretty spot on with how that worked out. So some of the effects we worry about with our EMS crews is the 59 to 64% increase in total transport times. We certainly worry about burnout. A lot of these crews, they're already beat up from dealing with the COVID pandemic. Now they're dealing with the effects of not having a local hospital. A lot of these staff members work multiple jobs. They work 24-hour shifts. So one of the things we were forced to do to stay competitive was to give a $2 an hour market adjustment, which brings our starting rate for an EMT to $19. That's certainly competitive in the region. It doesn't really put us ahead, but it ensures that we don't fall too far behind. One of the things we look at, in addition, that we don't account for with the transports, is the non-transport calls. So that's calls where people need assistance getting up, they fall, but they're not injured. Our refusals, our calls that support the fire department, the motor vehicle crashes that we respond to, where we might treat a patient, but they don't necessarily wind up getting transported. And all of that stuff is stuff that we do not bill for. For those of you that don't know, we're one of the few agencies left in Chester County that only bills if we transport a patient. So there's agencies in the county. The common theme is if they treat somebody, they send a bill. A lot of times insurance companies don't pay that if it's not a transport. So fortunately, with the amount of municipal support we continue to receive, we haven't had to go that route yet. And when patients say like, hey, is there a charge for this? We're always sure to let them know, no, this is the stuff that the municipalities pick up the bill for. You're not going to get a bill. And again, we always we try and personalize it. If I tell an elderly patient that I'm going to send them a $50 bill for picking them up off the floor, we're well aware that next time they're going to lay on the floor for 8 hours until somebody gets home, rather than calling us for help. So we want to make sure that nobody ever puts themselves in that situation. So like we said, 1,400 people a month need a place to go. We're going to see the increased turnaround times. We certainly have specialty care, unstable patients. One thing we always worry about is that patient that has an airway obstruction or some kind of hemorrhage where they could benefit from an immediate blood product. There's certain patients that have severe trauma. We might have stopped at Jennersville, had them stabilized, and then transferred out in a helicopter or an ambulance that can provide critical care. High patient volume versus divert. There's, in Chester County, hospitals can tell us they're on high patient volume, but they're not allowed to tell us we can't come there. So if they're telling us they can't come there, that's what's called divert. And that means there's a critical infrastructure failure. That pipe broke in the ER, their electric's out, their computer system's down, something internally that's catastrophic. So just kind of looking at what we were talking about, October 12th, you saw an hour and 57 minutes. Our crew waited to offload a patient. October 20th was 27 minutes. This has certainly gone up since the closure of both hospitals. But again, this impact report was published prior to the closing of Brandywine. So we did some projections. I'm not going to get too crazy into this because now we have some firm data, and I think that's more important to talk about. So just when we run through the call types there, obviously we know what a transport is. A recall is when we get dispatched somewhere and then it's determined that we're not needed. A refusal is where we treat a patient, but we don't transport them to the hospital. A fire standby is when we respond to a CL alarm, a building fire call, a car fire, and stand by to support the fire company. Assist public is, again, somebody falls, but they're not injured. We go out and assist them. somebody calls 911 and can't figure out their oxygen machine or something like that, they always send us over to try and help troubleshoot that. And a lot of times that's just a public service call, helping them get in touch with their medical supply company, things that people just need a little bit of assistance on. Unfounded, a predominant amount of our unfounded calls are medical alarms. People trip them and don't realize they tripped them. We go out and we make sure they're okay. Our DOAs and our calls for no service, and they're typically your car accidents that nobody's injured at. Any questions on any of that stuff?
Gary, are there any public assistance calls that are just handled over the phone? And is that on
Not
here? Okay.
Not typically, we don't handle. The only thing that we'll ever handle over the phone is usually a medical alarm. If we have a phone number for the patient, we'll call them ahead of responding and just see, hey, did you trip your medical alarm? And even then, we still stop by. That's just more for some situational awareness. Like they're like, oh no, I fell. I need some help getting up, just so we kind of know what we're going into.
Right.
But those, if they're like, oh my gosh, I was unloading groceries and I tripped my pendant, we're typically not going to go out for that. But anything other than that, that's about the only thing we'll handle by phone.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. So this was kind of a look at 2021, 61% of our patients went to Jennersville. So again, 61% of those patients were about to be shifted to other hospitals. We'll take a look at that. This is still some stuff that we see when we were doing our projections. All the tower health physicians and practices, there's certainly two really big groups right across the street from the hospital in the 900 building. We weren't sure who they were going to align with. I'm starting to hear they've aligned with Christiana, so that's good for our transports, because from Franklin Township, certainly a lot of the district, Christiana is the closest hospital anyway. One of the projection challenges was the uncertainty relating to Brandywine. We see how that worked out. Even we were seeing November and December, there was a lot of decreased consumer confidence in tower health, and patients just didn't want to go there. So we actually started with these challenges a lot sooner and saw our Jennersville numbers drop off, and they phased their services down. I would say pretty much the month of December, we might have taken one person a day there, but they weren't admitting patients. So if we knew that, hey, this patient's probably going to be admitted, we did the right thing from the door and didn't take them there, because all that was going to do was say, hey, we need to transfer you to another hospital. And we didn't feel that it was appropriate to put anybody through that knowingly. So these are just some different scenarios that we looked at. Again, these are scenarios that we ran. It's more important to talk about what actually happened. So one of the things that we looked at when we started developing our plan for sustainability was achieving adequate staffing, because none of this stuff works without adequate staffing. Implementation of a mid-level service. So a lot of times what will happen, if our first and second ambulances are out on calls and another call comes in, we'll usually send a fire department responder unit over to start rendering aid until additional help arrives from a mutual aid department, such as Union or Avondale. One of the things we've been able to do with Union Fire Company, and we're actually starting it this week, is the sharing of a third ambulance. So we're taking turns staffing a third ambulance on different days. Tomorrow is actually the first day of ours, where if all of their ambulances are out, our third ambulance will float over there. If all of our ambulances out, their third ambulance would float over here. And one of the things that we developed with our third ambulance staffing, we're calling it our power truck. It's up from 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. One of the things we're seeing from a budgetary perspective is a lot of overtime and extra time being paid out, because a call comes in at 5 o'clock, their shift's done at 6, and they don't get back till 7:30. So now I'm paying 2 people an additional hour and a half. Might not seem like a big deal till it happens 3 or 4 times in a week. And certainly that affects morale. People come in at 6 o'clock in the morning for their shift. They have this expectation that they're going to get done at 6, and now some nights they're not getting back until 7:30, 8 o'clock. So we're definitely trying to limit that with our power truck. And again, we continue to look at our transport destinations, get feedback from the staff, and make sure that we maintain the ability to meet the needs of the community. So January 2022, what actually happened? Well, we had our busiest month ever of 281 calls, we had a lot of sick COVID patients, and I certainly think that contributed to the volume. One of the things that was down was our mutual aid calls. We didn't respond to as many mutual aid calls as we normally do. So that, coupled with the increased COVID volume, certainly drove us to our busiest month ever. We only saw 3 calls at Jennersville Hospital. We expected that to be higher. What we didn't expect to be so high was the amount of second calls. So 109 times, or more than 3 times a day, when our primary ambulance was out, another emergency came in. So the second ambulance responded. And then while both of those ambulances were out, almost every day, a third emergency came in. The highest we got to at one time, there was 5 calls in our district. So after we exhaust the third calls, 4 fourth calls, as we would refer to them, and 1 fifth call. And obviously, with only having 3 ambulances, those 4th and 5th calls, and some of those third calls on days we didn't have our 3rd ambulance staffed, did go to mutual aid. Our transport destinations were pretty spot on. 40% of those patients went to Christiana, 50% of them went to Chester County, 8% of them were pediatric and went to DuPont. 2 patients went to LGH, and 1% other, I think it was a Paoli transport, as a follow-up to a recent surgery that a patient had. When we talk about level of service, 52% of the time it was BLS, 48% of the time it was ALS, which means a paramedic, most likely from Medic 94, rode in with us to upgrade the level of care being provided. Any questions about January?
So you said this was a lot of COVID calls. Of the 281, do you have a number on how many were actually COVID related?
So COVID related is kind of a broad term. We certainly had patients that had effects from COVID, but weren't necessarily like actively COVID positive. But I would say we had about 30 to 40 patients with confirmed COVID-19 or suspected of it that we transported that were pretty sick. And that was some of those 2 or 3 coming out of the same house where the whole house was sick. I know I went to a house, I took the wife on Wednesday night and the husband on Thursday night. So we certainly saw some of that.
So, I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it, but when we can't make the hospitals closer, and we can't, and hopefully this is a blip and people aren't running into these acute emergencies at the rate that they did in January. You know, when you ask for the increase, are you thinking, is it mostly payroll? Is it we need a 4th ambulance? Is it, you know, what?
So
where are you going with the money? I guess I'm asking.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the 281 calls is completely not even anything that we planned for. We planned to be between 240 and 250. We did 2,896 calls last year, so we expect to be around 240 a month. The additional funding comes into staff consistently, a 1st and 2nd ambulance around the clock. It's really important that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we have 2 ambulances staffed. Yeah. And then the power truck, that 9 to 9 truck, the goal was to have that up 4 days a week. Another big piece of where that funding came in was to give an unbudgeted market adjustment of $2 an hour to bring that starting rate to $19 an hour. Because again, we had all these great plans and staffing models, but none of them are going to work if we didn't have staff. Right. And I have had, actually, my expectation for losing staff, it hasn't been as bad as I thought it was going to be. We've had people that have certainly put less time in. It's important to understand right now, I only have 3 full-time employees. My other 40 are all part-time. So if I have somebody that works a day job, they work a Monday to Friday job, asking them to come in and do 3 calls all night where we know they're going to be up all night and not able to work their full-time job the next day can certainly be a challenge.
Sure.
So to retain some of those staff and even to be able to attract new ones, it was hard to say, hey, come to West Grove, we're a great place to work. By the way, every time you go out the door, you're going to be out for about 2.5, 3 hours. So we certainly needed to stay competitive in that field.
Okay.
So some of our action items that we worked through, And this is kind of stuff that's been ongoing, meeting with our municipal officials, real good dialogue with Representative Lawrence. We met with Tower Health every week until they closed. We continue to have a good dialogue with Chester County MS Council, the Chester County Hospital Senior Leadership Team. They're always asking, what can they do to help? And they're listening to our ideas. We published our impact reports that, again, if you don't have a copy of that, it's all similar, same data. I just put it into a PowerPoint form, but we're happy to share those with you. Working with the Chester County Fire Chiefs Association. The fortunate, unfortunate part of this whole thing is when this started, it was a Southern Chester County problem. Fast forward a month, now Brandywine closes. The whole county's feeling the effects of this. So everybody's got a dog in the fight now, and it entices people to work together more because we're all feeling the effects of it. So as we keep going, again, we reevaluated our 2022 budget. We've been meeting with the other stakeholders, Union Fire Company, Jenner's Pond, the state police, the regional police, Twin Pines. We want to make sure that we understand the impact to our other stakeholders and that they understand the impact to us. And certainly to develop the staffing models, which I think have been really successful. Again, we had 109 second calls and we responded to every one of them. And we responded to 50% of our third calls, which having it not being planned for and having limited days where we had 3 ambulances in service, I think that's pretty impressive. So any questions, any discussions, any points that I didn't make clear, I'm happy to elaborate on.
No, this was great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just going to say a big thank you. It's just, as we get older, I'll speak for myself personally, it's good to know that that you guys are there and your attitude is so patient-centric. It's really refreshing. And I know you wouldn't be asking for the money unless you needed it. And I think you did a great job explaining the challenges, so thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for taking the time to understand our challenges. That was one of the things that as a department we felt was really important early on. It's really easy to sit here and say, hey, this is going to affect this, but we really wanted to give an objective, clean look at exactly how it's going to affect us and be able to project things and have things to measure on. And we were pretty surprised at the end of January, minus the volume being higher than what we expected, because again, our projections and modeling were done at 240 calls. But outside of that, it was pretty spot on to first, second, third emergencies and transport destinations.
Gary, this is very informative. And I never knew that you got an average of like 9 or 10 calls a day. That's incredible to me. But what if what happens if you budget too little or budget too much? Like you don't spend as much money as you thought, or you spend too much money? Do you have a fund, like a fund for extra spending, or do you just charge out at the next year? Like I don't know how that works.
We certainly have a fund. Again, that's part of the goal of doing this quarterly, as we don't know what the volume is going to look like. If we see the volume continue to go up, or if we see something that causes our costs to go up, again, a lot of this stuff is so unprecedented. That's why we talked about doing it quarterly. So if there's something that we identify as a challenge that we didn't foresee, that we can come back and have a conversation. One of the things that we always feel is really important is to be transparent. We always try to be transparent with our municipal partners. And as we identify those things, I would be hard pressed to believe that we'll have extra money. I would love to, because obviously that makes me look good. But even stuff like the way fuel's going up. I mean, the cost of fuel is rising, and we do 2 or 3 trips and we're fueling the ambulance again. So we kind of joke about we can't let the truck drop below 3/4 because we could legitimately run out of fuel if we get back-to-back calls and have to go to Lancaster or something like that.
If I may, I attended a virtual meeting. It was led by University of Pennsylvania hospital officials. It was about the Chester County Hospital. But they had some very good points to share that may help all of us just plan ahead. They have run out of ER space due to COVID, so that's probably part of your problem with time. They've opened up the recovery room for COVID patients, and I think Carolyn Comita has helped them bring in some FEMA trailers to serve as a temporary ER room. They said with Brandywine closing, the psychiatric unit is closing, and that's a big gap for the county, especially for our region. There are very few hospitals with that capability. It's a losing service. They don't make money off of it. And so Chester County Hospital is trying to move some treatments to them, and they're going to try to add a psychiatrist. And I mean, it's not going to make up for it at all. And they were very blunt in saying this is bad news. This is really bad news for our community. But something for folks to be aware of then, that, you know, when you get ER calls, emergency calls, and it's mental health, you're going to struggle to know what to do with them, if you can do anything at all.
I just interject something really quick there. I can
Sure.
give you a great scenario of today. Chester County Hospital has 33 beds in their emergency department. And today, 20 of them were occupied by behavioral health patients that they
Wow.
weren't able to place. So we talk about 20 of the 33 beds, and it's important to remember from a staffing perspective, they all need one-on-one care. So 20 staff members in that emergency department were dedicated to 20 patients in 20 beds. So we were seeing very extended waits at Chester County today as they just tried to place patients with behavioral health needs. It wasn't even that they didn't want to admit them or just finding a place for them to get care outside of the ER, but their average boarders, 80 hours, 100 hours that they're spending in the emergency department before they even start to get the psychiatric care that they need. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's a very important talking point. We took a fair amount of patients to Jennersville that had psychiatric needs. Basically, they always went there to get medically screened and cleared before they went on to get care for behavioral health problems. So that's certainly been something that's impactful countywide, with losing, like you said, the only inpatient behavioral health unit.
So Nancy, did they give you any good news?
No. Well, yes, a little bit of good news. They said that they have a wing, I guess it's the West Wing, that they kind of overbuilt when they last built. So it's been underused. It's 329 beds that they're opening up. And they're working on, again, they said Senator Comita is helping them buy equipment and get that ready. On the other hand, they said that for them to have taken over Jennersville, they said it loses about $30 million a year. And the reason is because it's all Medicare and Medicaid patients, and they can't make money off of, I think because Jenner's Pond probably doesn't help, in the senior centers, like anyone else, they use their Medicare. And so the hospitals can't even break even unless there are more private insured patients coming in. You know, maybe someone will buy it, but it's a pretty tough financial
It's like a location problem. It's not a patient problem, it's a location problem. Jennersville is in a bad location for a hospital.
Jennersville is in a bad location because the patients around Jennersville are largely Medicare and Medicaid.
Yes, that's
same with Brandywine. And you can see that's what's happened in the city in Philadelphia, the hospitals that have closed. When there are too many publicly insured patients, they can't break even.
Yeah.
So I think that's all they said, but I think it's important to just remember those things.
Well, lots of good news tonight. So thank you very much for this overview. Are there any other questions before we just talk about it? Okay. So yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is, you know, West Grove does an excellent job explaining to us, you know, what they spend their money on and giving us I mean, it was pretty comprehensive when we talked to them a few months back. And as we were shown tonight, a lot of their predictions were pretty much spot on. So I'm pretty comfortable that they're doing the right thing with our money. So if there aren't any other comments, I think we should probably just go right to our motion.
Can I just add something? This is Justin Gatorno, the fire chief. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So, I just want to, we're not here to sort of pat anybody on the back, but I just want to, kind of, if you can't tell, Gary's been on the forefront of a lot of this. He's working with the EMS Council. We've had a lot of great conversations with Representative Lawrence, State Representative Sappy, and so the fire company has been asked, and Gary's going to present to testify in front of the House Veterans Affairs and Emergency Services Committee. So that's sort of bringing the local issue to the state level. So I think that's a big testament to what the information that's being put out there. So we're proud of that. We're not proud of the situation, obviously, but I think it's definitely a good thing to kind of help get the issue the recognition it deserves on the state level.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move forward. Thanks again for your time. We appreciate it. I know it was a bit of short notice, but thank you for coming in and presenting.
And thank you for having us again. If you guys, do you guys have a copy of the impact report, or would you like us to send that over so you can share with your board?
Oh, please send it over. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, we absolutely will.
And we can, yeah.
Very good. If you have any other questions or anything else comes up, please feel free to reach out. And one of our goals is to continue quarterly. Obviously, we talked tonight with the first month, but just to continue quarterly to share what those numbers look like, and especially when we talk about our volume and what the needs are to sustain the service.
Yeah, please continue. It's good information. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. So I make a motion to approve the West Grove Fire Company Service Payment Agreement for 2022. Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, seconded by Donna. Discussion, any further discussion on this? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries 5-0. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you again.
All right. So
Thank you.
Donna, would you like to open up the budget discussion?
Sure. Yeah, so before I make the motion, I just want to, well, maybe I should, yeah, no, I'll make the motion, then we'll have our discussion. I make a motion to approve the Franklin Township 2020 budget as amended. Can I have a second for that?
Second.
All right, thanks, Nancy. And now, just open it for discussion. I just want to make some comments. I actually took the time to review it again, and I do want to, and I'm sure you guys all know this, but Melissa, I'll just say a few things and I'll give it over to Melissa. Melissa has done a great job making sure that the emergency service fund, most of that money that we've been asked is already there. We're maybe a little bit off by $5,000, but there's enough money in the carryover budget to take care of that. So we're in good shape for an emergency service fund. So I just didn't want anybody worried about that. We have the money in the budget. And of course, we have some money that we have to pay from 2021, so that's also in there. And then the other thing that, in case anybody was worried about, Jones payoff is also in the budget. So it's been covered, and so it's not an unexpected cost whenever that gets rectified. But let me turn it over to Melissa. Melissa, if you want to have any comments for the group regarding your budget.
Sure. First of all, I like anybody have any questions or? Nobody?
I have a question. I know that John and you, Melissa, and maybe others did tons of work on this budget. And My question would be, is it easily transferable from QuickBooks, or was there a lot of manipulation after it got downloaded into Excel from QuickBooks to actually find certain things and put them into categories?
So the overall process of getting the budget isn't like easily, like you can't just download it from QuickBooks into the budget. You have to print off reports, and then you have to look at the reports, and then you enter the numbers into QuickBooks. But each of the numbers that is in there is like definite numbers. Like we know what we spent in 2020, we know what we spent in 2021, and just projecting 2022, we can kind of see the trend going forward. So, but for a budget, no, you can't generate a report going over.
Yeah, I was just mainly talking about the actual spend in 21. Was that easy to decipher?
Yes, very
Okay.
easy.
Okay.
So for that, you just run the year-to-date report in QuickBooks, and then it just comes right over.
Gotcha. Good.
And just to give Melissa credit, I think that took a lot of work on your part to get to that point. Before it was a lot of manual work, I understand.
Thank you.
So I think there were a number of changes. I don't think there were many since we reopened them, but there are a few high-level changes. I don't know if you can, either you or John can step us through the changes that were made when we reopened the books. I think one of them was a missed payment or late payment that wasn't accounted for. A couple other items, small items, I think.
Yeah, so one of the missed payments was for West Grove Fire Company, the Q3 payment. And that was only because I wasn't in the books then, and that's when Joan had left. So the Q3 payment was $43,333.72. But the breakdown of that is, and the cost code, if you look at the emergency services fund for the cost code 411000, $30,348.22 was added back into that, and then $12,985.50 was added into the 412,005. So if you look at all those amounts, that's what equals. That's why you're seeing that there.
Any other?
And Melissa, Melissa, the other thing, I think you did something with the American Relief Fund, right? You made sure that money was all put together, and you made sure that we didn't really spend any of that money. I don't know if I have this right, in 2021.
Right.
But we have it here that you have the ability to do that, right? If you choose.
Right.
To do so.
Yeah, so the American Rescue Fund money is all going to go towards stormwater, because we know we can spend that without any penalties whatsoever. There's no question, so we'll be spending that all for stormwater. So as I was talking to Jeff today with our 2022 road program, we were, in my mind, and how it has to happen is we have to break down our road program into 3 categories. We have what our state funds and our capital funds will take care of. Then we have what Yard Works does for us, and it's not really a separate fund, but it's just a separate accounting system. And then we'll have our American Rescue Fund for the stormwater. So it really has to be really organized and detailed, coming down to organizing it 3 different ways, so I can account for it at the end of the year.
Because only the stormwater can be, the cost of that can go against American Rescue Fund, so you have to segregate it. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Which gives us more money into the 2022 road program. So anything stormwater related, if you go back and look at history for 2021 any stormwater costs we're not really going to have out of the 2022 road program because we have American Rescue Funds that'll take care of that.
Are you still planning to take the 2021 money spent on stormwater and submitting that to American Rescue, or just you figure
No.
you'll spend enough? Okay.
Yeah, I'll just start clean in 2022, and because the final rule just came out, I've been studying the final rule, and I know all the accountability that we have to do as the township to account for that money when it's open for audit. So that's why I say, and I actually sat and talked to Jeff today about how we need to organize all this coming out. So it'll be, although our 2022 road program will be multiple people involved, it'll be organized into 3 categories.
Okay. But I think the big message is that we will not, and I think it's fine, we won't try to go back and retrofit the 2021. You're going to start clean, and you're confident we have a lot to do for stormwater that we'll be able to spend the American Rescue Fund in a good way that supports the township. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next installment we'll be able to do that too.
Great.
Is that the idea of the stormwater projects that are listed? We were trying to meet the 130,000 from the American Rescue Fund. We're trying to match it as closely as possible. Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand that. Okay. Because I just looked really quick and I saw like Walnut Glen had 17,000. I was trying to figure out if you're trying to get it as close to 130, or if you're trying to, I just didn't understand the breakdown. I got it. Can we take the 2020, so we can't get anything left over in 2021 and move it into 22? That's what you're saying, Melissa, right?
Well, we didn't spend anything in 2021 out of the American Rescue Funds for stormwater. We just paid it out of the general fund.
Right.
So to go back and do all that paperwork opens the door up to miss paperwork and audits and everything, and not submitting stuff properly.
Okay.
So for 2022, anything stormwater related will have a clear and concise developmental process coming down, and I'll be able to submit reports to say this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Which opens up all that money, that additional money for the roads for Jeff. So anything that normally, like if you go back and look at our 2021 road program, there was a lot of stormwater involved in that. So now that's coming out of it.
I mean, we have more than enough stormwater, right? So even with last year, what we did last year, we would have spent that money anyway in projects with or without the American Relief Fund. And so just moving forward, I mean, I agree. Like, we don't want to try and renegotiate the past. We're just moving forward, right? So it's easier just to cut it and then look at where we are today and move forward. So I agree with that approach. Makes sense.
Any other questions? Because then we could vote. Anything else for Melissa?
Donna, there's one thing that I would like to share with the board that I analyzed recently related to the EIT, because you remember EIT income really spiked up on us in 2021, and we really didn't understand what that was about. So what I believe happened in 2021, when you look at the graph that I sent you, is the strong increase in EIT last year occurred in the March to May period, which is right in the taxation period. So what we believe, and Peter, our treasurer, contract treasurer, indicated that it's possible that some people sold some expensive stock options. And when you look at the graph, you'll see that. So you'll see a big jump in EIT income from March to May, But then after that, the graph for 2021 pretty much followed the previous year in parallel, but of course much higher because of the step up in income. So it's unlikely that that will happen again.
Right.
We ended up with $930,000 worth of EIT income at the end of 2021. And that's unlikely to occur again. Keystone gave us a projection for 2022 of 790,000. That's what's in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really the appropriate projection for 2022.
So for context, for anyone who happens to be listening, is we had a huge increase in EIT this year. I mean, our run rates usually, what was 750,000 or something like that.
Right.
And then this year it was up to 900 something thousand, which was extraordinary. It's good news for us, but it was extraordinary. And so we were trying to figure out, is this our new normal, or is this just a one data point and we're going to go back to where we normally are? And it seems like that's what we're going to do, is we're going to go right back to where our normal run rate is, which is about $750,000 to $780,000 a year in EIT. So
I can tell you, I pulled the reports today from Keystone, and just in January and today, we pulled $126,874.75. So I was also able to go back and see there's a stock option, like to see who collected stock option. It's minimal. So I think someone has an income in the township. I don't think it's stock option whatsoever.
So we had another big month this month. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so far we have 126,874.75.
Well, there are probably some big incomes, like you say.
Yeah.
Well, that's important to know, because that's the difference between a one-time blip and a new normal. So
that's right.
We have
without jeopardizing people's privacy, right? It's just
right.
It's just a new normal.
Yep. So I pulled this report right before I left work today at like 10 after 4, and that's the number that came in.
Well, it's a month. I mean, it's a 1 month. It's a month and a half. We'll just keep watching it, right? And maybe by June we'll have a better sense. But I'd rather have it go up than down, because that shows our residents are hopefully doing well. Because when they do well, we do well when it comes to EIT. So let's hope it's a lot of successful people working really hard, making some decent money. So we'll keep looking at it, right?
Donna, I
Absolutely.
generated a graph that we can use as a tool. You can use as a tool this year. It's a tabulation and a graph of that tabulation. So if every month, at the end of the month, you put the EIT cumulative income in the graph, you can compare it to what's happened before. So you'll be able to see by the slope of the graph whether we're going to be parallel to last year or parallel to previous year. So it's something we should do every month as part of the Treasury report, is update that graph so you can see where you're actually at.
Absolutely.
So any other questions on the budget? Okay, I think we're in a pretty good place. So so the motion's on the table to approve the budget as amended. And can I have a vote? All in favor, say aye. I'm an aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, so the motion passes 5-0. Melissa, thank you, and John, thank you for all your work to get us here. I think we have a great budget for 2022, and we'll continue to build on it. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, John, for all your help.
Okay. So Jim, do you want to take us to the next topic? I don't know.
You know what, David, I agree with Nancy. I don't think I ever got an agenda, or else I didn't see it.
It's in the meeting book. Oh, it's on this page 2 of the meeting book.
I don't have it. I don't have it. I don't have it here. I'm
All
sorry.
right, let me see. That's okay. That's all right.
If you share your screen, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can do that. It's fine. It's not, it's pretty simple. We're going to talk about the establishment of an open space reserve fund. And that's it. There's no other verbiage on in the meeting book. So
Okay.
when we were talking about why we have workshop meetings, is we wanted to give us an opportunity to kind of just talk about where our heads are at, what we think about certain issues, and give ourselves enough time to talk about things without feeling rushed because we have a whole bunch of other reports and people waiting for us to get through our subjects. And this is one of them. The next one is also one that I wanted to put on here. And so the first one that I'm interested in doing is establishing an open space reserve fund. One of the things that one of the things that, that's not troubling is the wrong word, but one of the things that I find, that might not be optimal is we don't really have an open space strategy. Things kind of come up. Sometimes it's a 15-acre parcel or a 20-acre, whatever it is. It comes up, and then we decide there, should we spend the money or not? My thought is, let's make a budget item, call it the Open Space Reserve Fund, and talk as a board on what kinds of things we'd want to spend that money on, right? So my personal view is I'm not interested in getting into the real estate business. I'm not interested in buying property. But what I am interested in is helping residents who own large pieces of land ease that property, whether it's through an ag easement or some other type of easement, and having some money reserved to do those kinds of things to help them. So we're not necessarily taking things from the general fund or taking things from whatever other resources that we have to use. So when we bring it to a motion, there's going to be a couple of things we have to decide. One, do we have an open space reserve fund at all? Two, how much money should we be putting into it every year? And then, I guess it's up to us as a board, this board, to decide what kinds of triggers we might be interested in to make it worthwhile for us to dip into that reserve fund to preserve some land. Every board will have a different membership and have different ideas. But I feel like this board, to more or less, is in alignment to wanting to do some easement. And so we might as well talk about it now and hear where people's heads are. I just kind of told you my opinion in a general sense. I don't know how much money you put into it. I don't know if there's a cap yet. I'm kind of opening it up for discussion. So I'm done talking. I'll listen.
So this is Donna. So I also agree that I'm not interested in going in the real estate business, but also want to make sure that when those opportunities are available, that it's not always us looking, okay, when's the park fund being paid, or when's this fund, like there's actually some place that we could go and not trying to find 5,000 here and 10,000 there. It's just, I don't want to lose an opportunity because we can't figure it out. So I like the idea. I just want to be clear, like you said, David. It doesn't mean that everything that becomes available that we're necessarily going to spend it. We need to have a strategy, and I know the PRO is trying to work their way through that. But once again, it's the board's final decision. We'll be deciding where we spend our money. But I think it always comes from a place of strength. The only caveat, maybe I would just want to get the board's impression. If we do agree to do this, if by some chance there was an emergency and that we needed the money, I'm assuming we could use it, right? Because it's not like it's tax money. Like it doesn't have, like the intent would be it would be for open space. But say a bridge fell apart, or I don't know, a road blew up and we didn't have the money, would we set this up that we could go here after we did our reserve fund if there was that kind of an emergency? And I'm just putting that as a question.
Can we do that in general with any fund? Like if we're faced with an emergency, right? And I don't know, the salt fund,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Would, if the bridge collapses.
So I don't think, I think there's certain funds that the tax dollars are appropriated for those funds. I believe open space is one, emergency service may be one, that you can't, and I think it's fine. I mean, that money was, the taxpayers had a referendum, they agreed that this money would be put towards a certain place. So I think there's certain money you cannot touch.
Yeah.
I
Don,
think, Don, I think the only one is the open space because it was a referendum.
Is that, and that's because we have to pay a loan. So like if we don't have money in that fund, we can't pay our loan.
Yeah, but I even think when the loan goes away, I still think that money, I think I'm guessing even if the money goes away, that by referendum, that money is for open space. I mean, I know we have a long way to go before we pay the loan, but I believe so. I think that's open space money. Does anybody know
it is. It is. It was a referendum to add, and John may know, I think it was like 0.5% to the budget for that. But as far as I know, that's the only referendum we've ever done.
But I think we should make sure before we put money in there that we know that we can get it or not out of there, right? And then
for open space, I mean, the thing with open space, that loan's going for another 20 years. So we should find out. But it's not like it's going to be a problem. Problem's not the right word. It's actually going to be an opportunity. It's not like it's going to be something we have to deal with because we're going to be paying the loan off for another 20 years. I think the question I have on the table is, if we do the open space reserve fund, and I hope we do, I'm assuming we can dip it. It shouldn't be that we dip in all the time, but if there was a catastrophic emergency and we needed the money, that we could be able to get there.
Yeah, but remember, we also have our capital reserve fund. But I'm sure
Definitely.
Peter could answer that. My view is that specific amount of money was voted on, but not additional money. So putting additional monies in there isn't going to prevent us from being able to use them. And yeah, just a reminder, we have lots and lots of, not lots and lots, but a significant amount of money in our capital reserve.
All right, so I'm just kind of taking some notes.
Well,
So can we, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just had a quick question. Since I have the agenda, the next item on the agenda is the emergency fund.
We're going to get to that too.
So do we talk about those both together?
No, we can wait for that one. That's a separate one. We'll get there separately when we talk about the emergency fund. This one is just really just about can we ask, so we're going to ask Peter, the treasurer, whether or not we can pull money in emergencies.
David, I think you should maybe just take a minute and explain to Dawn about the emergency fund, because she may not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry, Dawn. I thought you were okay. Never mind. So the emergency reserve fund is our emergency reserve. So in a case of emergencies, we have a fund that we populated with $250,000, something like that. I think it might be a little less than that, and it's for emergencies. And so what I'm going to propose is we add a resolution that we maintain that emergency reserve fund at a given level. So, one would assume if we had to pull money out of that fund, the board, whether it's this board or a future board, would refill it. But that's not, I don't think we have any resolutions or rules to do that. So I want to just make it explicit that in the case of an emergency and we spend the money, we need to start putting money back into it to reestablish the fund. So what Donna was saying about in the case of an emergency is if we deplete the emergency, like a big disaster happens, right? We deplete the emergency fund and we still need to find money from somewhere. Can we use this open space fund to pay for whatever it is we need to pay for? So So that's, I don't know if that answered your question, Don. Apologize for.
No, it does. No, and I was, so the first one is the open space and whether we could borrow money against that for emergencies. I got it.
So, yeah, so we don't have an open space reserve fund. We have an open space fund that was a referendum to pay for this loan. And really what this is about is kind of organizing, giving an opportunity to organize the board around what our strategy is, and then provide an actual piece of money that we can use to help ag easement. So.
You for that.
I'm sorry, Joe. I was going to say, I see this as a separate, I mean, so we have our open space fund, and that's good. We have that's already in the budget. It's funded by the taxes as we voted on. But this would be a separate fund. It would be another page in the budget that would be the open space reserve fund that we would, hopefully that we get together and agree that we're going to put X amount of dollars in it every month. I mean, or every year, or however we decide to do it. And then when we have some opportunities, this would be a place, I'm not saying it's the only place we get money, but it might be the first place that we look to get money to do some of our easements.
Yeah, it would make sense to put it in the pro budget because they can keep track of it. Obviously, nothing's going to get spent without our awareness, but then we're not creating another category, and I don't believe it belongs with the open space loan. I think we should.
Yes, it'll be the open space reserve fund will just be the separate open space reserve fund.
Right.
And in terms of your questions, Dave, I think maybe $20,000 a year seems reasonable to me. It'd be nice to have the problem of having too many requests and not enough money, but we haven't really had any requests. I think we gave 15,000 last year for the Homesy property, and it sounds like maybe there might be a need this year, but it's pretty small change. However, there are a few large farms out there that might want to preserve their land, and so it's good for us to start planning on that.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
I'm fine with that number, but Nancy, what is, explain if it's a separate fund, how is it tied to the pro?
Because the pro committee, that's where we've put some of the playground equipment and other stuff. It's the Parks, Recs, and Open Space Committee.
Yeah.
And I think they have a line.
The fund ties to it, that's all.
Pardon me, Jim?
I'm sorry, I just don't know how the fund ties to it. Is that for them to suggest to us what to spend? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you now.
Yeah, it's not really the pro budget. It's more I guess we're getting in the word. It's the park and recreation budget. That is money, as you were saying, Nancy, for the park, to maintain the park, to improve the parks and trails, and I mean all the great work that Greg Sachs is doing, the healing garden, the trees. I mean, it's all, but it's not necessarily their budget. It's the budget to do stuff for the parkland. That's
understood.
The Bureau.
Yeah, and I just didn't know if this was additive or how it was connected to that, and it's just another place that they can go.
Yeah, the way I see it is they're really the front line for helping us figure out what we should consider, right? And I think so. This would be the open. So this reserve fund isn't pro budget. This is the open space reserve fund. The pro is primarily responsible won't be the wrong words, but they're the folks who are actually going out and saying, hey, here's something we might want to consider looking at. And then we can say, okay, well, if we do this, then, these other pieces are going to be in jeopardy, right? Because this is how much money we're going to have. This is how much money we're going to have in 5 years. Are you really going to want to, so that helps us. It helps me, I should say. I don't know if it helps you guys, but it'll help me put everything into context, right? So we're not just looking at random pieces here and there. It'll give us, more opportunities hopefully to say yes, but also more opportunities to justify saying no, right? Like, like here, I'm really worried about this 50 acres or this 100 acres, and I don't really want to waste any money on these 5 acres, whatever it is. I'm making up numbers, but that's the kind of thing that it'll help us guide our conversations.
I think Nancy had a good point where she talked about there's some large farms, and we're not naming any names, but there's large farms out there that we may need a nice chunk of change. So if we don't start saving, it's going to, even when we want to say yes, it's going to be harder because it's like, where do you get
Where's
the
the
money
money?
from? So
Yeah.
even, and I don't know how you guys feel, but even if the open space reserve fund only gives us 50% of what we need, it's still giving us a jump. It doesn't mean we wouldn't get the other 50% somewhere else, but at least, you have something to start with. So
We're in the
I think it's just,
conversation. Okay. So that was it. That was all I wanted to say. It sounds like most of us we're okay with this idea.
Where does it come from? Does it come from the
Okay.
general fund?
Yes, I think we'd have to pull it from the general fund, right?
Okay.
I don't know if Dawn's talking to us or, Dawn, you're in mute.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Are you okay? I didn't know whether you were talking to us. You okay with this idea?
Yeah,
Okay, she's good. You're going on mute and off mute.
Nod your head, yes or no.
Just no.
I'm okay. I was so distracted. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Well, I know this is your area. You love this stuff, so I wanted to make sure you had your chance to say yes.
I wanted to take this chance. Did everybody hear about what Greg did? Greg Sachs did?
I don't know.
I don't know. So Facebook, does anybody know what happened on Facebook?
What did you?
Well, I'm so excited because I get to be then the one to tell you. Friday, he came in and he talked to Jeff, and they were talking about the mowing and the stuff. And he said, "Can I put up a Facebook page for the park?"
Oh,
And-
that's right.
And Jeff said, "Sure." He put it up Friday night. He said, it's about the park and would people want to help? Would they want to do things? Would they want to know about things, the events? He was happy if he got 50 people. By this morning, he got 104 people.
Wow, that's
And-
great.
I called him Friday night or last night, and I just said, "Greg, I can't believe I fell on it just by happenstance and was just tickled pink." I mean, you can't believe if everybody can look on Facebook, it's about the park and it's beautifully done and it's so exciting. And the people that have listed themselves to be in the know and to help is just unbelievable.
That's great. That's really good.
Yeah. Can I also add that Greg
What's it
has
called,
set
Don?
up February 26th at 10 o'clock as a crossing cleanup day?
No, okay.
Yep.
Is it?
So so that might be that's a good point to bring up, Nancy. We're having a crossing cleanup day on the 26th. And I think Greg just sort of sent an email out internally to those of us who are, know him. And now that we've got this Facebook page set up, it sounds like we'll have a lot of volunteers to get involved. So that's great. Really good.
That'd be great. And Jeff can also include it on the regular Franklin page so that we
Yep.
get as many people as we can.
Yeah.
Yep, Mr. Sachs is awesome.
He is.
All right. So any other conversation around the open space reserve fund? Okay. So the only other comment I might want to maybe ask Jeff or Melissa or Sarah to look into is other neighboring townships might have some similar funds that they have, and maybe take a look at how they've set them up, and maybe we can look at things that we might want to incorporate for the board meeting when we talk about this in 2 weeks.
I can reach out to Penn Township with Karen Versick.
That would be great.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's really important is for us to maintain a strong relationship with Chester County Planning Commission. I know that the fellow who was there, Bill, well, Jeff will know, is gone. But the better relationship we have with them, the more likely that opportunities that come up, they will support and help fund.
Yep.
So Jeff, do you know who the person is now?
I can't think of his name. I've talked to him once on the phone.
Maybe we could get him in someday and, I even have him come to a pro meeting if Greg's into that and just make sure those relationships are strong, because when it comes to preserving things, we need them.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd bring him to a board meeting. I think it'd be good to, the pro can join us, but I would like to have him come to a board meeting and let them know our support for what they do.
Yep, I can throw out the invitation for a board meeting.
I think that's a great idea.
So the next item seems like a no-brainer, but we have to be specific. We have an emergency reserve fund, and we've done a nice job filling it. I don't know what it's just, the budget's right in front of me, but it's something like $232,000 currently. And the goal here was to just have a fund for emergencies. We have that fund, we've established that fund. And what I'm proposing for the board meeting is a resolution that the board maintain that emergency reserve fund. So if we do have to dip into it, the board or the township has to immediately start refilling that fund back to the levels that it's at. And that level could be where it's at now, that 232, or we could bring it up to around 250, whatever it is. But we don't have a resolution like this. I don't know if the resolution is the right word to use, or if we have to do something else. But the goal here, in my mind, is it automatically triggers if we spend the money that we need to start refilling that emergency reserve fund. And then two, if a board decides to not do that, they have to actually vote and say, no, we're not going to do that, and give some reasons why. So I want to have some sort of stopgap. So I don't know if this is the right way to do it or if there's any other options, but I open it up to comment.
David, am I reading the budget right, that we did spend that much last year in this fund?
No, we didn't spend any of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't spend any of it.
Jim, the way the budget has to be written, you have to have it as that it could be spent. So that's why you see it brought down as an
I
expense.
see the budget column. Yeah, I see the budget column with the numbers in it, but then I saw 9 months ended September, Jan to Sep. It looks like the same number. So I didn't realize that's not spent. That's the budget as well.
Yeah.
Okay. It's all the budget. I got you now. I'm with you.
So I'm bringing, and I wanted to raise this because it's something, I wanted to just make sure that maybe I'm not missing something, any details that we need to incorporate into this resolution. It seems pretty simple to me, right? If we spend it, we have to bring it back, we have to repay it.
Yeah, I already assumed that's what we were going to do, but you're right, we never stated it, so it doesn't hurt to put it in writing and have it as I think a resolution is probably the easiest way to do it, right? We don't need an ordinance, so I'm hoping we can just do it with a resolution.
I would think so. And I suppose,
guess, Dave, you're worried that maybe another board might say, hey, let's buy a bunch of trucks with this money or something else, or?
No, the concern would be like, a bridge collapses, we spend the money, we spend the $232,000. But then there is no impetus for the board to actually refill the fund. Right. So we had the board had agreed to create this fund and fund it. But I don't know if we've ever really talked about, okay, what's the board's behavior if we spend the money? Right. And
Well,
so right now,
I don't think we ever agreed on the total. We just were like, well, let's put some more in it. Let's put some more in it. So if what you're saying is let's just set an amount and say, hey, this is the amount we should always work towards having in there, then I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, is if we decide, we're at 232 now, let's just say we're $250,000 is the right amount of money to have in an emergency reserve fund.
Yeah, that sounds
And if
good.
we were to spend that money, we need to it needs to be topped off. We need to always have that money.
Yeah, I
And
support that.
then, but I guess the wording would have to be at some funding level that the township can swallow, right? We can't just
Yes.
say, well, if you spend $250,000, you got to put it back next month. You just say, we go back to, I forget how much money we put in every year.
45.
25 or 40,
45.
45, something like that. We'll go back to, there'll be some amount of money that we would put back into the emergency reserve fund. I mean, hopefully we never have to use it, but.
And I can tell you the PSAT standards is to have 3 months operating expenses in your capital reserve fund.
Okay. So that would be what? What is 3-month operating expenses? I gotta divide 4 million by 12.
Yeah, basically. But it just
So-
depends what months you're going by. So,
Yeah.
So that's might be even a little low if I do the math. Melissa, that's really helpful to know. Thank you.
yeah, it's 3 months to operating expense.
333,000.
Okay, so we need to probably work to get it up a little higher.
So two more years of funding, right? Basically.
Can we make the funding maybe just 50,000? Make it, was there a reason for 45?
Right. No, Jim, that's a good point.
And don't forget, we want to do the open space one too. I mean, there's only so much money.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, so I like the idea of getting a little higher, but I also like the idea of doing the open space reserve fund. So maybe there's.
We could drop it to 40,000 if we want. I mean, we'll still
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah. And sorry, Jim. And Donna, just remember, we're in a good position this year because we're going to have government funds for some of our stormwater work. So, we might as well take advantage of that.
Yeah, this is the year to figure that out.
Right. And the good news is you're saving it. So whether we put it in 40, 20, however we do it, it's still going into a savings fund, right?
Right.
So, yeah, this is a great problem to have.
Yes.
So it's all good. But I'm hearing you want to get the reserve fund up to about 330,000. I think I heard that's what you just said. Okay. And then that sounds good.
That's the
just have to figure out how to get it.
3 months operating budget. Right?
Yeah. And that's of course over time. It's so good to know what the standard is instead of us just guessing. That's really helpful. The recommended standard.
So that's all I had on the emergency fund. So I think we're good. Donna, did you want to talk about your board responsibilities?
Right, yeah, I don't really call them responsibilities as much as objectives. So I was just thinking as a board, each of us have things that we're really passionate about, and I thought we could maybe talk about them and maybe keep a list of them. Like, for example, and I think you guys all know this, the tot lot is something that I'm interested in, and we could talk a little bit about that tonight. Not to make a final decision, but to talk about it. But I'm also interested in getting work progressed on the township site. There's, we talked about for a while doing something with that storage area. So those are two of the areas that I'm interested in. I'm happy to work with other board members if they're interested in that too. But you guys yourselves may have things that you're interested in. And I thought maybe we could kind of keep a list of objectives as a board for 2022, and then we can just periodically, when we have these workshop meetings, check in with each other to see, how are we progressing. So it's just an idea to put out there to see if you wanted to organize yourself that way, or wanted to think about it that way.
So I like this idea because I think one is, we can use these workshop meetings, as you said, to kind of update projects. For me, one of the things that I really liked doing over the last couple of years is digging into the road program and working with Jeff on the roads. I drive my family nuts now when I drive anywhere because I look at that seam. Oh my God, but there's so yeah, this would be a good opportunity because these meetings we happen every month. We can, instead of having 3 special road program meetings, we can just talk about them at the workshop, right? as we go. So I think that's, or we can still have the workshop meetings if we want, or the road meetings if we want. But if you want to put me down as far as what I want to be working on, that's what I want to be working on this year. So
You can have that happily.
Well, Dawn, you have one. You have a favorite. Why don't you talk about your objective?
Well, since I talked to Greg the other night at length, I got so excited about his website and all that stuff. And I did talk to him about just ideas for events. And of course, I talked to Jeff's idea about Easter I want to help with. And I talked to Jeff also. He's working maybe on a farmer's market, which would be awesome. And I told Greg I would help with the meadow and any kind of, if we could do natural classes for kids or something like that for the park. And also, I really wanted to help with the Mason-Dixon project, which I had told you guys about. So other than helping with the progressive 10-year plan, I know we all want to work on that, but I'd love to cut into that somehow too.
You're like the outreach person. So it's all those going outreaching to the community and making sure that they feel connected to Franklin.
Yes, I was over at the winery. They called me the social director.
Okay, so should I write you down as social director? All right, outreach activity social director. Okay, sounds good. Okay, and no pressure for everybody else. Things will come. I mean, you'll be aware. I don't know if there's anything that Jim and Nancy want to talk about, but if not, we can talk about as ideas come your way. We can just make that connection. We can talk about it at these meetings.
I'm going to reserve my ideas or my affiliation till I figure out what I want to do.
That sounds
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things. So spring is coming.
Yeah,
So
I'm going to hold off too.
That sounds good. I thought if I could, I did send you guys something in the mail, and I don't know if someone can project it. I don't know if they have it on, but it's just about the tot lot. And as I said, I don't want us necessarily to make a decision tonight, but I did wanted to take a chance to show you some of the pieces we already have in Crossan Park, and they're actually quite nice. I don't know. Do you have it, Jeff? Are you able to?
I can bring it up if you want me to. Sure.
That would be great. I can tell my story. I promise I won't take a lot of time.
Let's see.
And these are all pictures by Jeff.
I've got it,
so.
Jeff. If you want to let me share my screen, or if you're getting close, then no worries.
Nope, I'm getting close, but I thank you for the offer.
But I mean, are we going to talk about this tonight, or you just want to make us aware of it, Donna?
I was going to make you aware of it. I think we should take it.
Yeah, the public, it wasn't advertised, so we can't talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's just to take you through what I'm thinking, and then we talk about it at the next meeting, if that's okay with everybody.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I have Norton Safe Searches on it. For
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, it looks like
That's not my problem.
Yeah, that's Jeff. You might be sharing the wrong screen or a wrong window, wrong.
Okay, well, for time's sake, I'll let Nancy do it. That's fine.
And Jeff, you got to update your Norton, it says.
Yeah. All right, you just have to enable me.
And David, for the record, I do have the agenda. I thought you were talking about something else before.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
All right, no problem.
My misunderstanding.
Oh, it's asking for my system preferences. I guess I turned off screen sharing.
All right.
I can try it again.
Hold on, let me give it one more.
There
Oh,
you
you're
go.
there. Good. All right.
Nice.
So, so I started off by showing you the current state, just to give you an idea that we do have some nice pieces already in the playground. You can see we have a nice sliding board and a little bit of climbing for the younger kids. And if you roll down, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see we got some interesting sliding boards. Go down a little bit more. We have some swings. They could probably be updated. We can talk about when do we want to do that. Keep on going down, Nancy. So that's some swings for little kids, and there's some more swings if you keep on scrolling down.
I think it's Jeff doing it.
Oh, okay, Jeff. I'm sorry. So you can see some swings for the older kids, and then you see the horse and the duck. That's like little kids sit on that and they jump back and forth. But these, if we can stop here for a second, Jeff. These are the two items that if the board agrees, I would like to replace this year, next year, hopefully this year. One is this climbing thing that is kind of uninteresting, not a whole lot of fun. And the other one is this spinner. And let me just scroll down a little bit, Jeff, so I can show what we could possibly do. And so this is the 10 spinner. You can see the difference between this spinner and the spinner we have. First of all, you can sit in it. So it is. Oh, good. Thanks, Jeff. It's ADA compliant in the sense that you could actually put a child in it. They're not just hanging on for dear life. It's plastic, so I think you don't have that cold metal. But it is something that I would like us to consider. Like I said, we don't need to do it tonight. And if you go further down, Jeff, you'll see that there's another kind of climber that we could do. They have a diamond shape and they have a cube shape. It's just much more interesting climbing, and you get some of the older kids involved in that. So keep on going, Jeff. So that gives you a sense of what's out there. There's also something that I know is close to Dawn's heart. Just go down. This is it's called a slide along, and the kids you also have the ability to sit in a chair. So it's ADA compliant in the sense you can put a child to sit in a chair. But it's like a ripcord kind of thing. Zip line is what they call it, and it's a possibility that might be a third thing that we could bring into the park at some point. But so we have these opportunities. I know there's a lot of interest in the zip lines.
Well,
Now that's good. That's the good news. The bad news is the cost. And if you go down a little bit more, Jeff, and it's not so much the cost of the item itself. So, for example, the spinner is about $4,000. We just put the gravity cube in here. It doesn't mean we would be going necessarily with the gravity cube. That's about $13,000. So that's expensive, but it's not crazy. But it's another $15,000 to install it. And when I first saw that, I'm like, Jeff, why is it so expensive? And it makes sense. I mean, we're talking about children, we're talking about insurance, we're talking about liability. So you need to make sure that this thing is installed by a credible, licensed person, that, God forbid, anything would go wrong, that we would be able to have confidence. And also, hopefully, nothing would go wrong because everything would be done the way
Donna, it should. I'm not comfortable going too far in this because we're going to need to go over the same information at a meeting.
Yeah, that's really all I have. That's really all I have
Okay.
to say for tonight. So I don't really have anything more. I just want to paint the picture.
Maybe Sarah can put it on our next meeting as a topic.
But I hope in general we could get.
Yeah, sorry, it should go through the pro. I mean, are you talking with the pro or how's this working?
Okay, so I don't know why it has to go through the pro. So the pro, I would like to get the pro's feedback, and I know that the last meeting, their feedback was that they really weren't interested in this. I think mostly because of a money perspective. I think they were concerned that it would deplete the budget, but that's not what they said. They said that they didn't support replacing the equipment in the tot lot. So that's their opinion, but we're the board, we make the final decision. So that's why I'm bringing it right to the board.
Right, but have they seen your latest proposal, or I don't know where you left it with them, but it seems like out of courtesy to them, if you could just share with them your view and the pieces that you're interested in. And I would be happy to hear their perspective.
Definitely, I'm happy to do that. We could make sure that they have that in their hands, but then I would still like to bring this to the next board meeting. Maybe Greg and I could talk. So that would be fine. I just know
Right.
they just had a very negative reaction to it. So,
Hey, Donna, is this the quote that the pro committee looked at in the first place? Has there been another quote?
I don't think they've seen this.
Well,
'Cause they
Jeff,
did
maybe you
say
can help me. I
something.
know they commented that it was very expensive and that it was very expensive to install. So I don't know if they did that from a sense of what it costs versus did they actually see numbers. I don't know that answer. Jeff,
Well,
do you know?
I can tell you from the last board meeting that I've kept Greg Sachs up to date with these prices. So he is aware of them, and you know, if you want them to discuss it at the next pro meeting, they can, but he's been made aware of the pricing for me.
Well, Greg is one person, so it's important that he discuss it with others. And I thought they'd only talked about the spinner thing, and I don't think they'd realized, or they just were realizing how much it cost for the installation.
I agree. The installation seems really high to me. But maybe it's not. I mean, maybe there's some underneath the ground. Maybe they have to dig and put footers in and all kinds of things. So it would be nice if we're going to talk about this and you really want to have a decision at the next meeting or something like that. I would like to get a further explanation of the installation.
And multiple quotes too, if we're going to go any further with it. Yeah.
I don't know if there's other professionals that do this, but or if we've worked with this company before, or if they're well known, but it's just that the price of the equipment doesn't give me any pause. It's what do they do when they install it? That's the question.
Not to add more complications, but it would also be good, you know, we put those wood chips and everything in, and that was quite pricey, as I recall. That was, I don't know, Jeff, was it 20,000 or 30,000 by the time we were done? And I don't know how well those are holding up. When I last looked, they didn't look that impressive, but you know, I think we should look at the big picture too.
So Jeff, do you think the gentleman that we talked to would, I think his name is Jeff too, would come and talk to us about the installation? Would he
Absolutely.
do that, or? Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's get him at maybe we could get him at the next meeting. And Nancy, based on your suggestion, I will send this, and I'll put an email explaining what we talked about. But I will send this to Greg and ask him to share it with the pro. So I'll give him the presentation that I've prepared for you guys, and that will take to the next board meeting. So I'll put an email around it.
I mean, for me, ideally, it would be a multi-year strategy.
You went on mute, Nancy.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Sorry, guys. I was just saying that, you know, we just got done worrying about $20,000. This is a lot of money. And ideally, I'd like to see it as a multi-year strategy rather than just what we're going to do this year, because maybe we don't want to do everything this year, but maybe we can do it over the next 3 years, let's say, or something like that.
Right. And I can talk about this at the next board meeting. I think there may be enough money if the board agrees to do the spinner and a climbing thing, and then look at the zip line and maybe some swings at a later date. But let's take it to the next board meeting and talk about it.
That's the best idea.
Any other
Nancy,
comments? Other additional
one more.
information?
Nancy, were you suggesting or maybe bringing up that we replace the mulch with like that rubber stuff, the rubber?
Yeah.
Instead of wood?
Yeah, Jim. I don't know. I just happened to look at it the other day, and I know it's winter and it looks particularly, you know,
Yeah.
blah.
We could probably I could take a ride by
Yeah.
Nickel Park and see how, because they have the rubber things at Nickel Park, I think, right?
Exactly. And I don't know how long these wood chips last. They already look like they're kind of, you know, falling apart. It's all kind of like there's ruts and there's all kinds of stuff that doesn't
I can't, playground mulch does not last that long.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I buy it for I used to buy it for my kids' backyard play area, and after about a year, it doesn't look good. You know,
and
it's
it's
not really
the single safest item in a playground is what the kids are going to fall on. So I think it's worth including that in a multi-year plan.
Well, yeah, I mean, particularly if you can kind of come up with something that's a little bit more durable and long-term.
Yeah.
Yep. So, no, Jeff, you were trying to connect. We actually talked to Jeff, the Lions recreation guy about this, and I thought they said mulch was probably one of the better things to have in terms of safety. Not that we couldn't look at something else, but we did talk to him about doing the rubber stuff, and talk about pricey. I think once again you're tens of thousands of dollars. I thought he talked about 20 again, but I don't have those numbers, so I don't want to be quoted. Jeff, do you remember what that? I mean, I remember having the conversation with him.
I remember us having the conversation too. I do know it is significantly more expensive. I can't give you a dollar amount tonight. If and when we replace all of the mulch with rubber, we just can't do a half measure. We can't take 2 inches of mulch off and just put the rubber on top. It's got to be all or nothing. Now, when we replaced it all, that mulch had been in there for roughly 20 years. And what usually ends up happening is after use, it settles, and then each year we'll top it up.
Yeah,
or every other year we may get 50, 75 or 100 yards and put up top and make sure our fall distances are all accurate. And then our insurance company comes out each year to inspect things as well.
Yeah, because I seem to remember some issues with, there's some environmental issues with using rubber over mulch. I think it's 6 1/2 in terms of safety. The mulch is pretty safe, and it's like you said, Jeff, it's easy to go over the top. I mean, we're having this conversation. We don't really need to. We can have it when we have an expert in to talk about it. But it's again, it's a number of items that we need to kind of address in the park, and kind of come up with a strategy.
All right. It's my little project, so you'll keep me busy. I'll come back next board meeting with some answers, and we'll have the expert with us, and we'll continue to have the conversation. So, thanks for that.
All right. Thanks, Donna. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our workshop meeting. So I'll wrap this up with a public comment. This public comment can include comments on anything attendees might want to share. Commenters must state their name and whether they are a township resident or taxpayer of the township. I think we only have 2 members of the public with us this evening.
David, this is John Auerbach, a Franklin Township resident. Just the response to that last discussion about the tot lot surface. We just replaced that about 2 years ago, and it was an expensive project. It required removing all the old material and putting in a new under drain system, piping, and along with it with new material. So I'd go back and look at that scope of work and see whether that is appropriate or it's holding up the way it should be. That's fairly new material.
Yeah.
And
That's a fair point, John.
it is certified playground mulch that we bought.
Yep.
So it's
It
not
could just-
something from Mr. Mulch or anything like that.
It was high-end stuff. That was not a cheap
Yeah.
project. So I'd go back and look at that before you condemn it.
John,
Yeah, I
do you
don't-
know
I mean,
how
I don't
long
think-
it's supposed to last?
Sorry, I think we spent about 20 to 30 grand on it. And my point is, for that kind of money, I'm not sure we should have to be fixing it every year. Right now, there's some pretty big holes where if a kid fell in it, it's.
I think we're supposed to be topping it off every year. We're not, I don't think we've topped it off.
I just don't know if we built that into the cost of it, but we spent quite a bit of money.
I believe the number was 15,000. You can go back and check it.
So
I think it was 15 on labor and then whatever the material was, but yeah, whatever.
regardless, the point is we should be topping it off every year. If we haven't topped it off in 2 years, that was where the ruts come from, right?
And
You
how
might
much
just have
does
to rake
topping
it
it off
out.
cost? Because I don't want to keep, if topping it off every year costs 5 grand, then we better rethink our strategy.
Right. You might just have to rake it out. I mean, if you think about
Or
rake it
baseball
out.
field, they rake a baseball field every night. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So that might be an easier fix.
Yeah.
That might be a
All
good
right.
volunteer activity too.
All right.
One other comment about the reserve fund. I think the board's right on with the right strategy. Just to give you a little history and how we got that started. That started very early when I first got on the board. And here we had a nearly $3 million a year budget, absolutely no money in reserve for anything that could come up. So the board, by resolution, I don't know whether we had a formal resolution, but we agreed to start this reserve fund, and we put 45,000 a year into it every year until we got to about $250,000. And the $250,000 number was really an arbitrary number. It matched a potential project that we were getting ready to do at that point and didn't have the money in the budget. And that was that salt shed. That was about $230,000. So that's where the $250,000 came from. So if you remember recently, the board decided not to continue to put any more money into it because it got to the level that board expected. But certainly a policy is entirely appropriate as to how much you put into it and how you manage the money in and out. So I think you're right on the mark there.
Thanks, John. All right, so if there are no further comments from the public, I make it a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting at 8:56 p.m. Any discussion on adjournment? No discussion on adjournment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion carries 5-0. We adjourn this meeting.